Hello again, everyone. Ken from Whittling Woods, back again with another tutorial. I think for this one here, we're going to call it the Complete Beginner's Guide to Getting into the Whittling Hobby. And by that, I'm trying to help people who are thinking about getting into the hobby understand how you should approach it and what your first purchases and whittles should be like. Some of the items you'll need. We're going to have a list of different knife manufacturers and stuff. We'll have all those links in the description. We're just going to talk in segments here, little chapters, so to speak, of what you're going to need to get started. So this is really geared towards people who are thinking, oh, you know what, I'm tired of sitting around watching TV on my cell phone. I want to do something. I want to actually do something. I want to do something with my hands. And whittling is a great hobby. It's very inexpensive to get into. It's an absolutely phenomenal hobby for anyone of any age to get into. You can pick it up and put it down at any time. There's not a big cost investment. It's mentally it's good for you because it helps you focus in, and in the end you get these cute little whittles that you could have and give them away to people. Some people, I guess, even sell their whittles, but you do whatever you want. They're just fun. It's a great fun hobby to do. It doesn't take a lot of time, doesn't take a lot of money. So anyway, this is kind of an overview. I have everything laid out here, but we're going to talk specifically about each item. So go grab yourself a cup of coffee or whatever you like to drink and sit back, relax, and I'll kind of talk you through the way you should approach getting into this hobby. Alrighty, I'll be right back. Okay, chapter 1 of our Complete Beginner's Guide to Getting into the Whittling Hobby. That's choosing your first whittling knife, or choosing a whittling knife. I have some examples of whittling knives that I own. There's plenty of brands out there. I'm going to have links of a bunch of manufacturers that I feel are worth checking out. Unfortunately, some of these, like this Denny knife here, no longer exist. Well, at least I don't believe they do. But this is Mike Shipley knife. It's OCC Tools now. They make great knives, great for whittling. The thing you're going to want to look at in a whittling knife is the length of the blade, and I'll pull out a tape measure here. You can see this one here is just about 2 inches, give or take maybe 2 and 1/8 inches long. I'd say you're going to want to go with something in the neighborhood of 1.5 inches to 2 inches. Your first knife with a straight cutting edge, just like this one here. That's just one example. And this one here is from North Bay Forge, and you can see the blade on this one's a little smaller. It's about 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches or so. And so I'd say, maybe 1.25 inches to 2 inches is probably where you're going to want to go. Like I said, this one just happens to be it was an old boning knife that I kind of manufactured and made. I just cut it down and shaped it a little bit. But I'd stay away from making your own knife if you're just getting into it. Look at some of the manufacturers. Like I mentioned, this is a Denny knife, and you can see they're all pretty much the same idea, the same profile. They're straight. The cutting edge is straight across. That's going to be a better choice for your first whittling knife. This here, Helvey knife, same kind of thing. Pretty fancy hand on this one as well. The reason I bring out some of these here, different types of, look into either getting a piece of a cork to cover your blades. If the manufacturer, like this Helvey, came with this little leather sheath on there, so you can store it that way and keep it safe from protecting the blade and your hands from grabbing it. If you don't have that, grab a cork and put split it and put the knife in there, or make your own, like this here. I just took a piece of leather and glued it together actually and formed my own little sheath for this knife here. Some ideas, or you can just put it in a block of wood. But keep your knives protected if they don't come with some type of sheath. Keep the cutting edge safe from damage and from cutting yourself. Like I said, I'm going to have links in the description. I would recommend, again, that you stay away from mass manufactured knives. I've owned a few different brands. Definitely stay away from the kit package, the one that has a knife and different gouges and all that kind of stuff. Don't go that route. It might seem like, oh, for $80 I get like 4 or 5 different knives. Most of them do not come ready to whittle, and they'll just be more trouble than they're worth. So put your money into a decent wood carving knife. Spend like I said, $30 to $60 and buy yourself a dedicated whittling knife from a from a manufacturer. And again, I'm going to have links of different manufacturers. I'm not recommending any specific, just ones that have a reputation for making quality carving, whittling knives. That's what you want to go with for your first knife, because they're going to come, and the manufacturer will state that they're going to come ready to go. The blades are ready, the bevel, everything's honed up, sharpened. It is literally, you take it out of the box when you get it and you start whittling. They come ready to go. They're that good. A lot of other ones don't come ready to go. It's going to require some work, and if you're just getting into the hobby and you're not familiar with sharpening and honing knives, stay away from that. It'll be more trouble than it's worth, and you won't know what a sharp knife is like when you start your first whittle. The first knife I bought was like that. It was not ready to go many years ago. I've been doing this for probably close to 25 years, and the first knife I bought wasn't like that. And boy, I just about gave up whittling because it seemed almost impossible to get a nice clean cut until I bought a dedicated whittling knife. I think it was either an OCC knife or Denny, probably the Denny knife. This is pretty old. And I realized what a sharp whittling knife is like. And so from that point forward, I understand how to maintain the blade, what I needed to get to in order to keep the whittling as easy and as effective and as clean as possible, and as safe as possible. The sharper the knife, the safer it will be. So that's a little tip on the knife. The next thing we're going to talk about will be the next chapter, chapter 2. So let me get set up for that. Be right back. Okay, chapter 2 of the complete beginner's guide to getting into the whittling hobby. I'm going to say that a lot in this video, but hopefully you find it useful. This part here is about keeping the knives we talked about in the last chapter sharp and carving ready. You're going to want to get yourself some kind of strop. You can make your own. Buy a piece of leather. Go to the hobby stores. Go pick a piece of leather out. Get a piece of hardwood and glue it to that surface. That's all you need. You can buy them already made. They're probably not worth the money. You can buy a pack of leather pieces at these hobby supply stores for really cheap, and you always have a piece of scrap lumber around. Just to do that, it'll cost, and use like a tacky glue it on there, let it set up overnight, and it'll be ready to go. You're going to want some honing compound as well. This is Flex Cut, the yellow Flex Cut, and this is your standard green honing compound. You can buy both of these online. I tend to use the Flex Cut honing compound, the yellow or the white versions that come first. I'll apply that and I'll do a strop with that, and then I'll go to the green. I think this cuts just a bit finer than this one. Just real quick, I do it a little bit differently than most people. Most people take their strop like this. They'll apply some honing compound, and I'll put some of the green. And then they take their knife and then they run it. This is the cutting edge. You're moving away from the cutting edge. You don't go back and forth like when you're sharpening. You just go away from the cutting edge. You take it down, lift it up, and just keep doing that. I would say before you start your whittle, you do this 20 times on each side, depending. If it requires a little bit more, then do more. And I would say every 10 to 15 minutes, depending on the wood you're carving, you might want to stop and do another 20 passes. I do the yellow, and then I'll go over to the green. That's how you do it. I happen to do it a little bit differently. Again, it's just my preference. I'll take this little piece of plywood cutoff that I have, apply my honing compound, and again, it's two-sided. I apply the green on one side, the yellow on the other side. And I do it a little bit differently. What I do is I hold the knife in my hand up away from the surface like this, and I take the strop and I run it this way across the blade. It's basically doing the same thing. The reason I do it this way, and I've been doing it this way for years, is I can see the cutting edge. I see what I'm stropping. So I just run it over here, and I feel, for me, and again, it's all personal preference. Try it both ways, and see what you like better. I feel like I get better control when I do it this way. I turn it around, and I, again, go across the blade this way as well. I just feel I have better control, and it works for me. You can use the larger strop if you want. If you have a strop like this, and effectively do the same thing. You don't need a small little piece like I have. I just have this because it's a little portable and easier to store. But those are what you're going to want to do. That's all you're going to need to do. If you buy a dedicated whittling knife, you will only need to strop it periodically to keep it sharp. It'll stay sharp for a very long time. Very unlikely will you need to go to some kind of sharpening stone to do it. You're only going to have to go to a sharpening stone if you damage the cutting edge, or you drop it, or you want to reconfigure for some reason. But if you're brand new to whittling, don't get overwhelmed. A lot of initial getting into the whittling, talk a lot about sharpening knives, and it can seem kind of overwhelming. If you buy a good whittling knife, you won't have to go that route. You'll learn that down the road, and it's something you're going to need to learn to sharpen a knife, and it's actually kind of enjoyable, because then you can start doing things where you take other knives and you reconfigure it the way you like it. So it's something to keep in mind. But initially, brand new to whittling, just getting into the hobby, again, the complete beginner's guide to whittling, go buy yourself a dedicated whittling knife. Get some leather, get some honing compound. So you're talking maybe $40-50 here. You're talking, maybe $10 for this, and the leather and a piece of wood. It's cheap. Maybe under $10 for all that. So it's not a big investment, and that's going to be the bulk of your whittling supplies right off the bat. So you've pretty much got into the hobby just with these few things right over here. So anyway, we're going to talk quickly about the other thing you're going to need for whittling, and that's wood. So let me get things set up, and we'll start the next chapter. Okay, chapter 3, I believe we're on, and that's going to be the wood. If you're doing figure carving or just whittling in general, go out and grab yourself a chunk of basswood. This is basswood from, I think my wife picked this up. It's just a chunk of basswood that's, let's see here. It's about 4 inches, a little over 4 inches, 4¼ inches by about 1 3/4 inches. And it's square, I believe. Yep, it sure is. So you can find this pretty cheap at some of the hobby, the bulk hobby type stores. It's relatively decent basswood. I've done a few whittles with this, and it's actually pretty good. This piece of basswood is a cutoff from basswood I bought from a supplier of basswood specifically. There's a few out there. You're going to want to look for the northern basswood. It's really high quality stuff. It's great for doing your little figure carving. It holds detail really well. It paints up great because there's not a lot of grain in it. And you can get it in various size and cut it to whatever size you want. If you have a bandsaw, it's going to be easy to cut the wood. You can also use a scroll saw if you have that too to cut. Or if that doesn't work and you don't have a lot of that stuff because of where you live, just go buy yourself a little handsaw. And it'll be a lot more work. But if you're buying chunks of wood like this, it's probably going to be a lot of work to cut it down if you need a smaller piece like this. But you can find smaller pieces like this as well. This here piece happens to be 1.5 inches. That's probably a decent starter size for most people. This may be just a little too big, but depending on what you want. The other alternative, and you've seen me use this is just a piece of dimensional lumber. It's Eastern white pine. I bought it at one of the big box stores. It's a pretty decent alternative to basswood. Not the same quality as basswood. You can see there's definitely more grain in there. It's really cheap to purchase, a lot cheaper than basswood, and you can give it a shot. It's going to be a little bit more challenging because it tends to be a little bit more fragile, but overall it's actually pretty good wood. I don't mind using it for projects, and I find it locally, so it's pretty cheap. And again, if you have a bandsaw, just cut it to whatever size you want, or grab your handsaw and do it. I do a lot of handsaw cutting because I don't have where I live now. I don't have room for a bandsaw any longer. I used to have it, but I don't have room any longer. I have a little scroll saw, and sometimes I'll use that. And you can pick one of those up pretty cheap, but if not, grab a decent handsaw and just cut it to the size you want, and then do a cross cut and then a rip cut by hand. And then you can always do that. That's the way they used to do it, so no reason you can't do it that way as well. You can also use, and again, this is just a chunk of, I believe this was a piece of maple, and I did a whittling video on this maple wood spirit buddies, I think it was called. You can just go out and find a little chunk of wood like this, cut it to whatever length you want, and whittle a little wood spirit. I really enjoy doing wood spirits. These are fun. Check out some of the videos I've done. They're a lot of fun. So you can also do that. Now, the issue with that is if you're buying a Helvey knife, if you own one of these, they're not really designed to cut hardwood like this. You're going to want to make sure the wood is pretty green before you use a knife that's really, the bevel is kind of designed and set up for softer wood like basswood. If you're going to tackle this kind of whittling, you might want to get a pocket knife or some other knife that you dedicate to harder wood. So you're going to want to maybe have slightly steeper bevel on there because it's a little harder, and the more shallow the bevel, the more fragile it is. And harder woods like this, you may wind up chipping out your block. But if you're just getting into the hobby, go with basswood. Go find. I'll have a couple links in the description for places you can purchase basswood, or just like I said, go to one of the hobby supply stores and go pick up a chunk again. They're pretty cheap. You can find them for a few bucks. So that's it. If you're, again, complete beginner's guide to whittling, go with this first. Give it a shot because it's not a big expense. You'll be able to try it out because you might find it you don't like it, and your biggest investment was probably the knife, and you can always resell that if you really don't like the hobby. But I think once you get it, you'll kind of get the bug and you will enjoy it, and before you know it, you'll start accumulating knives like I have over the many years I've been doing this, and you'll try different woods out. But initially, go with the basswood. Maybe if you happen to be in one of the big box stores and they sell eastern white pine. I know a lot of places don't. I live in the Northeast, so I'm fortunate and I can get it. It's a relatively cheap alternative, and you can definitely whittle pieces of this. I've done videos with this wood as well. So anyway, I'm going to get everything ready for the next chapter. I'll be right back. Okay, here we are on the next chapter of the complete beginner's guide to getting into the whittling hobby. The next thing you're going to want to pick up, and most people already have a lot of this stuff, is tape measures, something for measuring right angles. It helps. You don't necessarily need it. You can use just a regular, pull-out tape, a folding tape measure, or my daughter had gotten me this. It's an antique. It's pretty cool. It's like a folding style tape, folding style roller, and I think it's kind of cool. I like using some old antique stuff. I like keeping them in use. These are great little tools, and they hold up. It's amazing. This thing is probably, I don't even know how old it is, but it's probably been around. I've been around a long time, and I'm sure this predates me even. So buy yourself stuff like that because you're going to need to take measurements every so often, and maybe if you're marking a piece, you can certainly do it without using a tape measure, just by eye. And I don't use tape measures all that often. Sometimes for the videos I do, just to show people. What I typically do, and this is the other material supply you're going to need, is some type of pencil. I happen to use these coal erase pencils, but you can use like the standard number 2 pencil as well. Whatever you have. I like these because they don't smudge as easy as the graphite pencil. And what I typically use this for is just marking references. A lot of times before I start a whittle, I'll mark a center. And everybody has seen people do this. They hold the fixed distance. They guesstimate the center, and then they just run it down like that. So you have a center, and you're going to do that on all faces and even the top. It just is a good way to start your whittle. It gives you references when you're especially if you're doing figure carving. It'll give you a decent reference to work with. If you're doing the face, you're going to want to cutting off this section of wood here, angling the whole front back, and this section over here. So you kind of can gauge how accurate you are. You're going to want, if you're doing the nose in the center, you're going to have a line to work with. It'll just kind of help you out, when you're doing the split in the legs. All these references are good. And then you can kind of come down and mark whatever points. Like, okay, let's say the head. When I do a piece, let's say I'm using this, what did I say, was it about 4¼ inches? I tend to look at it this way. Let's assume we're doing like a figure carving over here, like this type of fella. We're going to say, well, this is the way I approach it. Is I'll mark off a level, something along the bottom for his where I feel his shoes are going to be, his feet or whatever I'm going to do. So I kind of mark that in there. Now I look at this portion over here, and again, these are cartoony type figures. These are not anatomically correct. On a real person, the head is about, your body's about 7 to 8 head lengths. So you can see that's not the case here. His head's much oversized, but they're cartoony. They're Whittles. And if you try to do it to anatomically correct, it would look it wouldn't look as good in this type of whittling. If you're doing actual real lifelike carvings, then you're going to be using gouges and everything else. But for knife carving and whittling, that's what you're going to want to go with. I typically then look at everything again if I'm carving a figure, and then I'll guesstimate the thirds. I'll say, okay, maybe a third for the head, a third for the body, give or take, and a third for the legs. So I don't even measure. I just kind of get in the habit of looking at it that way. If you want and you like to be accurate, grab yourself a tape and do that. But sort of get in the habit of using your eyes and your best guess as far as dimensions go. It tends to, as you start to carve the piece, it tends to work better if you get an understanding of measurements and dimensions without becoming fixated on actual numbers. It helps initially, granted, but again, you're going to want to work in a more freestyle way, and sometimes. And listen, if you watch my channel before and you like the whittles I do, this is the way I approach it. Some people do much more exacting measurements and everything's measured out, and that's all fine and well too. But I think in the end, with this hobby, when you're sitting out on your deck or your patio or on your front porch and you're whittling, you're not pulling out tape measures and everything else. You're just kind of going at it. So get in the habit of just looking at it that way. That's a good way to start. So anyway, we talked about some measuring devices and how to kind of mark off your piece to get started, and I'll be right back for the next chapter. Okay, here we are back at the next chapter of the Complete Beginner's Guide to Getting into the Whittling Hobby. That's actually doing some whittling. If you got your piece of basswood, either whatever piece you want to use, you're going to want to start. I wouldn't start whittling a figure right off the get-go. Just get comfortable with the knife, and I'm going to go over real quickly some of the basic cuts you're going to need to do. Your first cut is your standard push cut. So you're basically pushing the knife. The cutting edge is moving away from you, and you're pushing it through the wood, just like so. Just practice that. This is the easiest cut to do. Go from, if you mark your line, just practice going from line to line. Like so, do that. Go to the other side, do the same thing. Because what this will help you do, you're going to use this cut predominantly in whittling. It'll kind of get you understanding the grain, working with the grain, working against the grain. But again, there's a lot of technical discussions on grain, like bunches of straw and all that kind of stuff. You'll see when you're whittling and your knife tends to start to grab and chunks of wood don't easily, like if you're cutting with the grain, it's going to curl off. Your wood's going to curl off. If you're cutting against the grain, it might just break off. So this is pretty straight grain wood. So again, with basswood, you typically, there's still obviously the grain and there's slight variations, but for the most part, you're not going to find it as predominantly as much of an issue. You'll see, and you'll notice when the wood tends to grab and not cut away easily, you're probably cutting against the grain. Flip it around and do it the other way. That's your first cut, doing your push cut, and you can see, you're just going to want to go around and maybe round out, turn it into a cylinder. Just practice like that. Get comfortable holding the knife, get comfortable cutting with it, and geometric shapes, forms are some of the hardest to whittle. When you're trying to do something that's perfectly symmetrical, it's very difficult because it takes a lot of practice to get to that level. And I 25 years of whittling, and I'm still not there. But that's why figure carving is good, because you don't have to worry too much about symmetry, but you can kind of see here, and that's why having the lines, ignore these darker lines here, but the red lines, having these lines, you can kind of see, okay, am I symmetrical? Well, this is pretty close over here. Maybe this is a little off. So let's say you're getting ready to do a hat or a head. You can kind of look from the top, and you can kind of see, you know where you want to be. Okay, I'm pretty close to where I need to be. So it helps. That's why the lines help, and again, especially if you're doing figure carving. The next cut you're going to want to get used to is the pull cut, or paring cut, whatever you want to call it, where your thumb is secured, again, not in line with the cutting edge of the blade. You see, it's not there. Don't hold your thumb up here and do this. That's a recipe for disaster. That'll get you to the to the emergency room pretty quick. And this is your paring cut, where you're holding your thumb over here and you're closing your fist. You're just going down here, you're closing your fist. Again, get comfortable with this cut as well. You'll be using this on quite a bit. Again, just do the same thing. Just get pieces of wood. This is where the Eastern white pine comes in handy, because it's pretty cheap. You can, you don't care if you eat up expensive basswood doing this. But you know what? It's a hobby. It's a learning. You learn by doing, and you're never going to learn by just watching me whittle. You're only going to learn by actually doing it yourself. So, like I said, shut the computer off, shut the phones off. Get out there, participate in this world, and enjoy the whittling hobby. As you can see, anybody can do it. It's not difficult. And if you're into expressing yourself in a creative way, this is a really, really fun hobby to get into. Again, it doesn't matter what age you are, you can do it. I wouldn't maybe recommend little kids doing it, but you can certainly start when you're fairly young. And so those are your two primary cuts: your push cut and your paring cut. So that's two that you're going to have to learn. The other one is basically your stop cut, and I'll demonstrate that here. Let's say we're forming a rim of a hat or an eye. We're going to basically put our knife in the wood, straight into the wood. In this case, I'm going straight into the wood, and then you're going to do a push cut up to that stop cut. Kind of like so. And then practice those. Go, make stop cuts. Go around the whole piece, doing a stop cut and then cutting up to it. And just kind of practice that. Go around. Once you've made a cylinder out of it, go around a few times. It'll teach you knife control. You're going to use this stop cut a lot, no matter what type of whittling you're doing. Figure whittling, little mushrooms or pumpkins or animals, whatever. The stop cut's going to be a big thing. You're going to use that quite a bit. So get comfortable doing that. Again, you're just putting your knife into the wood, and there's other ways to do it. I mean, you could also do where you basically make a cut in the wood like that. Sometimes you'll have to make your stop cut like that. You can't just press into the wood, and you'll be able to use that as well. So again, get comfortable with that. Practice doing the stop cuts quite a bit. Get your piece of wood. Like I said, once you made a cylinder out of it, go around and practice your stop cuts. That'll help as well. The other cut you're going to want to do is a type of cut you're going to use for a whole variety of reasons. Hair, maybe. It's kind of the substitute for a V-gouge, where you're just basically coming in the wood, maybe at a slight angle, and you're kind of cutting a line in like that, and you're going to flip it around. You're going to come back, and you're going to basically kind of remove that little chunk of wood. You're going to use that for a variety of things. Get comfortable with that too. Put your knife in the wood. You can either go straight, depending on what you're aiming for. If you want your V-gouge look or something that you would get with a V-gouge, you're going to angle your knife. Again, you're sort of using a paring kind of cut here. And you're just going to make a line in the wood like so. Just a little cut in the wood. You're going to flip it around and come back from the opposite direction and pull out a chunk of wood like that. That's all. Get comfortable with that. So you have your push cut, your paring cut, your stop cut where you're going in and cutting up to it, and then your little line cuts and the boundary defining hair, a whole slew of things you can do, clothes, a lot of different things you're going to, from when you're cutting out maybe the arms on a piece, you might have to use that cut where you're coming in and you're making a line right down the middle, and then you're coming back and you're taking out the wood. So those are your standard cuts. That's pretty much, practice those. Take a piece of wood and just practice. Get comfortable. The more comfortable you are using the knife, the better you'll be. Don't worry about following tutorials like I do with figures and all that kind of stuff for the time being. Just get comfortable with doing the wood. The other thing I would recommend, once you made your cylinder, go around and turn the top into a ball. Just work your way. Because most of the time you're cutting on the plank side of the wood, and it's easier. The knives are designed to cut like that. As you start getting towards the top, you're getting to the end grain of the wood, and then it becomes a little different when you cut. The end grain's a little bit more trouble because it's you're cutting perpendicular. The grain's running in this direction. You're slicing it right off. It's a little bit more difficult to do, but you're gonna have to get used to doing that as well. It'll also tell you if your knife is sharp. If you're cutting end grain, when you're stropping your knives, and people say, well, how do you know it's sharp? Or well, if you take your knife and you cut across the end grain like that, and it's fairly smooth and it cuts relatively easily, and it leaves a fairly glass-like finish, your knife's sharp. If you see scratches and lines, your knife's not sharp. That'll really test the sharpness of your knife. So if it leaves scratches as you get closer and closer to the end grain, if you start noticing scratches, little white lines in the wood, there's probably a little flaw in your blade. Try honing it out first. Try stropping it and see if you can get rid of it. It might just be a small little imperfection that a strop will deal with, but sometimes you have to go back to a stone and sharpen it up a little bit more. But again, most of the time you won't need to do that. And then, like I said, just practice different things. Just get a chunk of wood and start whittling. Get comfortable making wood chips. It's kind of fun, and if you have a fireplace, collect them up and burn them. Or spread them out in the woods somewhere. There you go. Those are things to get comfortable with your knife. So that's that part of the hobby. Complete beginner's guide to getting into the whittling hobby. That's what you're going to want to do. Alrighty, I'll be right back. Okay, here we are with the next chapter. I've lost count, but we're going to talk briefly about finishing your piece if you're doing a figure whittle. I'm just going to bring out this guy again. If you're doing figure carving, you're probably going to want to paint it. So you're going to go, there's different ways to go about it. I'm going to do a separate video on painting. I don't want to really get into the actual process of painting right now. I just want to talk briefly because, again, these are some of the supplies you might want to consider purchasing. But if you're going to just do whittles like this little mushroom over here, you don't need to paint it. You can just go right to just a wood finish at the end. And maybe initially it's probably a good thing. Some people are intimidated by painting, but it's actually kind of fun and it's not really that difficult to do. And again, we're going to do a separate video on the painting process. I would go out and don't get overwhelmed. You go to the craft supply stores, they have hundreds, literally hundreds of bottles of paint. I would say go with a green, a blue, a yellow, and a red. And then maybe get some kind of off-white. This one here is called linen. And like a Payne's gray, I think this is. Yeah, something like that. That's kind of, honestly, that's really all you need. Don't get overwhelmed with a lot of things. If you want to, if it's easier for you to buy a color that's skin tone, and then do that. I like to mix my colors. If I'm using like that shirt, that orange shirt. I don't have orange here, but I used a little red and a little yellow. I mix them together and I get orange. When I put the blue in his pants, I use that same orange as a complementary color and I tone the blue down. I feel it works better. It makes all the pieces it makes the whole piece come together. If you tend to use as small a palette as possible, it'll in the end it'll look better for you. But again, we're going to do a separate video on painting, but these are just some of the, I would just go out and buy yourself. They come in packs. They're relatively inexpensive, these type of brushes. I like the ones that are plastic. If you're using acrylic paint, you're going to want to wash your brushes out and you're going to be keeping them in. I have a little old mug over here. I keep them in with water and I wash them out continually. I found that if you go with ones that are painted wood handles and not plastic or metal, over time the wood shrinks and swells, and it'll crack the paint and it'll start breaking apart. So I tend to find the plastic handles or the metal handles a little bit more durable for acrylic paints. And you're going to want to use like synthetic type hair brushes. They work better for acrylic paints. They're very easy to clean. Just when you're done painting, when you're done your piece, and in between, wash it off in your mug of water. But that's where you get a couple little brushes, one maybe a little bit bigger, one a little bit finer, depending on the pieces you're doing. And they come in packs, and they're not overly expensive, and you'll probably ruin a few of them, and you'll have to go replace them. But they're pretty cheap. So as far as finish goes, all my pieces, whether it's like this or like that, get Howard Feed and Wax finish on there. I just apply a little bit after I'm done. Sometimes I'll when they're thoroughly dry, sometimes I'll run them under a hair dryer just to warm them up a bit. I'll put a little Howard's Feed and Wax on there, let that soak in overnight, wipe off some of the excess, and they're good to go. I like this. I don't like using polyurethanes. If you're going to use a piece and handle it a lot, you might want to have more of a plastic finish like a polyurethane or something like that. I don't particularly like that myself. I mentioned this in a number of videos. I kind of like the waxes and the oils better. I feel it works with the wood a lot better, and it keeps the wood, it helps the wood a lot. So there you go. And I think it gives a nice matte type sheen with just enough of a glow on there. It warms it up. It really makes everything come together. So I'm a big fan of this product over here. But there's probably other similar products you can buy. But anyway, there you go. That's a brief little talk about the finishing of the piece. Again, we're going to do a detailed tutorial on how I paint my pieces. So let me get stuff ready, and I'll be back with the next chapter. Okay, next chapter. Thanks for staying with me this long. Here's how I would progress if I was just getting into whittling. After I had my practice chopping up a chunk of wood like this and practicing all the different cuts we talked about, my first project would probably be something like a mushroom. You don't have to worry about painting it. You can certainly paint it. I did a video on this. Again, I'm going to have links in the description for all these too. And I have a whole beginner tutorial series if you want to check that out as well. And this is one of the projects. I think we did this one on the project. I think we did two actually. We did this and a morel type mushroom. This is what I would do. This is actually on a piece of butternut, but you don't have to use butternut. You can use. I think I used the Eastern white pine in the video. And we did two. We did the this mushroom and the morel mushroom. And morel mushroom, I'm pretty sure I use the eastern white pine. So it's a simple little project to do. It's great. You'll get all your cuts. I'm going to grab my knife here, and you can see we're dealing with push cuts. We're dealing with stop cuts down in here, down in here. You're going to have some pairing cuts at the top. So it'll get you, once you've got the practice on a piece of wood like this, tackle this kind of project. It's simple to do, they're easy to do, and people like them. So they're kind of fun. You can give them as gifts to people. And mushrooms are organic. You really can't mess up the shape. It's so simple to do. Go look at a few pictures and try it out. I'll show you the morel mushroom I did. So, you know, they actually are really fun little projects to do. The reason I think, you know, maybe you do with this, you don't have to worry about painting it. In this case, I didn't paint it. I think the morel, I put a little coat of brown paint on it and then dry brushed it. But real simple to do. You just you can have fun with it and give it away as a gift. They're great little projects to do. Great first project. Then I would graduate up to doing a little evergreen tree like this. Again, we did a video on this. I believe this specific one right here. These are great projects. They're not all that hard to do. The nice thing about these type of projects, you get a lot of practice cutting and design and symmetry, asymmetry, and then you can maybe tackle a little bit of painting afterwards. So it's a great little project to do. Again, a great gift item. People love them. They're just really fun to do, easy to do. You almost can't mess it up. And check out the video. It would be the second project. First, maybe like a mushroom. Next, a little tree. The third one I tackle is maybe not necessarily this small. I think I have a video on. Yes, I do have a video on this little owls. They're real fast to do. This will give you kind of a little practice getting ready to do figure carving. I have this video on doing a little owl like this. These are, again, I believe this is a piece of walnut. But you can use basswood, anything you like. These are real simple. I think there's like 15-minute owls. So they take no time at all to do. They're real simple to do, and it'll kind of get you ready for the next type of whittle. Do a bunch of these type of things first. You'll have great products. You can give them as gifts. People love them, and you know, bing. You're now a whittler, and you can decorate your own house with these kind of things or give them away to people. They're fun little projects to do. After all that, after you've had practice doing that, tackle a figure. You know, get a little. There's plenty of people that do whittling videos. My channel. There's tons of other channels out there that do little figure carvings. Then tackle the figure carving. Don't everybody maybe wants to jump right into it. It can be a little intimidating first, but then tackle a figure like this where it's relatively simple to do. He's got no eyes, his hair's covering, he's got no mouth, he's got a beard. Do a simple figure first before you graduate up to something of that caliber where he's got a mouth and he's got eyes and ears and all that kind of stuff. It's essentially the same type of figure. It's just adding a bit more detail. So go from this one to something like this after you've gotten practice doing something like this, then graduate up to this. If you start with a figure like this, not that this is complicated, not that it's very hard to do, but it'll be more frustrating. You might mess up, and you don't want to get discouraged. You want to try all these things first. Get yourself excited about the hobby and get yourself into doing these fun little whittles before you tackle something like this and kind of frustrate yourself. That's how I would progress if I was starting out again. Mushroom, tree, little owl, these type of things. I think there's also like 10-minute wizards and stuff like that. Try those little whittles out, and then graduate up to something like this. And then you get into the painting and more detailed stuff, mouths and eyes and hair and, all this nose and all those more complicated things that are fun to do. But again, for a beginner, it might not be the way to go. Get yourself comfortable with the equipment, with the tools, with your whittling skills. Build up your skills doing these things first. So there you go. I'll come back and we'll just conclude this little video. Okay. Again, thank you very much for hanging in there. I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions or comments or whatever, feel free to leave them down in the description. I'll be happy to to answer any questions that I can answer. Real quick, I I'd be neglectful if I didn't mention this, because I do get this question quite a bit. When you see me whittle, I don't wear whittling gloves. I started out. Here's one I owned when I first started whittling. This is probably 25 years old. This glove, and you can see here how many times I hit my hand, and I cut the thumb many times, so I have a thumb guard that I wrapped around on it. I've sliced into it. That potentially would have been my skin, or my hand. So the guards and the knife and everything that protect me. Here's the issue I have with these on two levels. One, you tend to get a little sloppy. And when I'm wearing the glove, I feel like, I maybe I don't pay as much attention. Somebody asked me, why don't I wear a glove? And I try to be as careful as I can. I'm very mindful of where that cutting edge is. And that is something you're going to want to learn. Definitely, if you're a beginner, feel comfortable. Go buy yourself a glove. They have Kevlar in them, and they protect you. They won't, if you stab yourself, it's not going to help you. But if a slicing cut, it will help. I'd recommend it. They're not that expensive. Grab yourself one, and if it makes you feel better and safer, then I would recommend it. And a lot of people who've been carving for years still use them. So there's nothing wrong with using a glove. Again, you can see here, you get lazy sometimes because you feel like you're protected. And I would rather I like being mindful of the blade. If you're wearing a glove, it doesn't mean you don't have to pay attention to where the blade is. You should still be aware of the blade. The other issue I have is gloves tend to, if you're marking your piece up with pencil lines or whatever the case may be, they tend to get dirty over time. And they're very difficult to clean, these gloves, and that dirt transfers to the wood, and I just don't like that, and I feel like I don't have as much control. I can't secure the piece as well as I can without the glove. So again, my thinking is that I'm very conscientious of where the blade is. So I avoid cutting myself. In the past, when I've cut myself, and I have cut myself, I have always cut myself because I was not paying attention to what I was doing. I was rushing. I was grabbing the knife. Most of the times I cut myself when I'm sharpening or going for the knife or drops or something like that. That's usually the worst cuts I've had are usually because of that. And so you have to constantly pay attention. This is a sharp instrument that can slice through wood, so it can easily slice through your finger. Wear a glove. Starting out, wear a glove. Be careful, be safe, but always pay attention to where your blade is. And again, the other safety issue, and it might seem counterintuitive, but the sharper that blade is, the safer it's going to be. If that blade's not sharp and you're pushing and pushing, or you're trying to do this and you're grabbing at it, it's just not cutting, you're going to put your thumb or your hand or something in the wrong place because you're forcing the knife through. That's when you're going to get in trouble. That's when it's going to be dangerous. So stop. Sharpen the knife, strop it up, do whatever you need to do to keep it sharp. Keeping your knife sharp is the number one safety tip that I can give people. And then paying attention to where that blade is. If you're cutting a piece and you're doing this, and you're cutting down into here, sometimes you got to do a cut where you're bringing the knife down towards your hand. You want to try to cut away from your hand or your skin as much as possible. Sometimes you don't have a choice. You have to cut downward. You got to be secure your blade. Don't just willy-nilly push in this direction without using your other hand to secure the blade or the hand. If you're pushing like this and you're not securing yourself, it's going to jump and cut right into you. So always use some type of securing method. When you're cutting like this, use your thumb as a fulcrum. Hold this down. Don't just kind of try to cut like this. It's dangerous and it's unsafe. You always want to have control. You always want to be aware of where your thumb is. If you're doing a paring cut, again, like I mentioned, don't put your thumb up here like that. It might be kind of out of the way, but it's going to cut into your hand. Secure it, get it down below where you're cutting. So when you pull that knife back, it's away from your thumb. So be mindful of the blade and keep it sharp. If you're starting out, grab yourself a carving glove. Be safe, be careful, it's important. Anyway, that's it. I think we've covered essentially everything. I hope you did find it useful, and I know I've talked about this before, but I wanted to do kind of an all-encompassing video that was geared towards people who are just thinking about getting into it, and I hope that's what I've accomplished in this video. And again, any questions, comments, feel free, leave them down in the description. Next week we'll be back with another tutorial. Take care and have a great whittling week. Talk to you soon.